issues that happen. And so really what CSU gave me was an understanding of history, which kind of was boiled down through the process of comprehensive exams to inform my worldview, but also my worldview informed this as well. It's kind of dialectical. And so I realized that nonprofit work kind of provided an avenue to apply this understanding to issues that I hope to get involved with, like land use. And I found San Juan Mountains Association. So the thesis, or excuse me, mission down below our logo is really kind of like what my my thesis was. So we need to really create a connection and be stewards of these lands that we play on or work on. I think my definition of connection and responsibility might be a little more than what, the status quo is, but San Juan Mountains Association, or SJMA, really is providing me an opportunity to kind of start making these inroads and start talking to people about how we can make sure that these landscapes stay around for us to keep playing on in the future. Here's some kind of stats in the bottom right. We do a lot of great work in the San Juans, both on Forest Service and BLM land. And so I guess, I don't know how familiar a lot of you are with like the theory behind mission statements and how to enact them, but there's this thing called theory of change, which is what this explore, learn, protect thing is. So we have our mission, and then we have a way that we think we can achieve our mission. And so by getting people out exploring on public lands, they can realize what's so great about them. Through our education programs and ambassador programs, we can make sure people are responsibly recreating and learning how to get the experience they'd like out of public lands. And then the end goal is through our stewardship work and also encouraging people to leave no trace and have a sense of stewardship for public lands, we can protect them. So we have multiple core programs. I am in the visitor information one, and that's my flowery title up at the top. I'm a public lands ambassador. What that means is I talk to people about how to safely and responsibly recreate on public lands. So it can be anyone from, stalwart jeepers and bikers and multi-day backpack trip people to first-time recreationists that just don't know the difference between Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, and National Park Service, but know that there are these things called public lands and they'd like to get out and enjoy them. So I'm technically a BLM contractor. I work in an interagency office, and my position was created through a series of partnership agreements, which is like contracts between SJMA, BLM, Forest Service. Way above my pay grade to understand those, but that's kind of how this position that I have came about. My number one role is providing this visitor information, but I also do community outreach for SJMA and our partners. And it's kind of the same thing. I'm either talking to people in the office or talking to people at events. Like I went to Uray Ice Fest and tabled there and handed out wag bags to mountaineers because mountaineers love using wag bags. And this kind of, I'm not necessarily doing history work per se. I'm talking to people about public land, but I'm not talking to them about the dual mandate or any like things that we study at CSU. But the theory is the same as public history. I'm meeting people where they are. I'm letting them gain their own experiences, but facilitating that and guiding them in the correct direction. So be it recreation or being at a museum and learning actual like dates and names and overarching themes. It's similar theory. And then along with those two large tenets of my role, I also get to do support on projects. So I've done a lot of planning for our front desk volunteer program, which is something I didn't expect to do with a master's in history, but diverse experience. I've gotten out in the field a lot. Really just doing things that have picking and choosing opportunities that make me a more diverse employee in the future. And I also have had opportunities to do some actual history work. I'm working on an administrative history on a wilderness area that the BLM office manages. And that came about really because I was here. I had these skills that I gained from CSU. And I asked the rec manager if he thought it'd be beneficial. He thought it was a great idea. So that's turning into an interesting project. I'm going to Western History Association's conference to sit on a round table talking about it next October, if anyone's going to that. So it is like a lot of liberty through working for a nonprofit because it's a small staff, which means they're supportive, but it also means that there's a lot of flexibility to kind of do work to achieve their mission. And I wear a lot of different hats through that. Everyone else wears different hats. I've done some grant writing. I'm involved in some interesting community committees and programs. So there's a environmental education committee that I'm on with our education director. And then a recreation and conservation alliance based out of Uray County that I've been a part of. So it's still advancing towards this like goal that I developed through comps, through writing a thesis, kind of the change I want to see. And then my job is a venue to get me there. So how did I find this? Like I said, I developed this understanding of history and kind of a worldview, which as much as comps is a traumatic experience for many, it's once you get removed from it a couple months, it's actually very beneficial. And so that's really helped me narrow down what I wanted to get out of a job, and it gave me a sense of direction and kind of allowed me to vet places based off of like what missions align with what I want to do. So like I mentioned earlier, SJMA's mission is largely what my so what at the end of my thesis was. So it means a lot to me. And through that, it's fulfilling work. But I had to get through the cover letter and an application process, which is kind of can be discouraging for a lot of historians, I feel, just because I don't know about everyone else, but I'm pretty tired of hearing the like, oh, what do you want to do with a history degree question? And that's really what a lot of people's mindsets still are at, is like, you have to teach because engineers do engineering, journalists do journalism, historians, what do they do? But we have all of these skills that we've developed through the program. So we're all great writers. We're good at time management. We can manage projects. We have to do that at least 2 times every semester. And we can communicate well by presenting arguments and providing evidence. And then we also have this thing called public history that is really special and again has a lot of overlap with what employers want anywhere. But it's largely up to us to connect these dots for them through a cover letter and in the interview. because again, people still kind of don't think, oh, environmental nonprofit, let's hire a historian. So that's really the biggest part of the job search for me. And last year, it was like pretty difficult applying to positions because, I mean, I narrowed myself down geographically and what I wanted to do, but also the job market was just jacked up because of COVID. Excuse me. But yeah, being able to communicate these skills that we have and how they benefit an employer is really the takeaway of this process, in my opinion. Down below, I have a couple of resources I used to look for jobs that I wanted. High Country News Classified section is awesome. I still check it just to kind of see what's out there. It's a little more humanities friendly, in my opinion, than like the Texas A&M job board, which has just like everything related to public lands and conservation. So definitely check that one out. So again, kind of the gist of all of this is you can be a historian in a non-traditional history career. We shouldn't silo ourselves to that, because the best way to get people to stop asking what you want to do with a history degree is to be a historian doing something interesting. So if there's a position that you might not, have a clear path to based off of whatever program you're in here at CSU or what your experience is, still write a cover letter and apply to it. The worst that can happen is they don't reply. And that's really like how to change this perception, in my opinion, is we have history degrees, we have this training, we can apply it to any situations that we're interested in doing that with. So why not put yourself in the position to do that? Again, interpretive work isn't just kind of what we initially go to, and that's really up to us to change that by taking up spaces in these positions. I got really lucky with SJMA where they were very amenable to a historian and really appreciate what I'm bringing to the organization in general. But it's even being here, I'm really good friends with the geologists and the BLM in our office, and I just share history books about coal and uranium, which is what his work is. And he, the other day, picked me up at the airport and said, I really appreciate this kind of conversations we have going on. And that's something that if I were a communications major, not a historian, he wouldn't have that. And he wouldn't start realizing that, like, there's a lot of history to this, to these landscapes and to these places that they manage. A kind of a personal gripe that Childers might enjoy if he's in here is how I'm kind of slated in the recreation department of the BLM, and just talking to actual public land recreation managers, they all still love wilderness in the American mind and think that that's like the be all end all definition of wilderness. And so I've been having great conversations through this Gunnison Gorge administrative history with the rec manager in that department, just kind of getting them, sending them Will Cronin, sending them other works that are a little more inclusive and critical of a lot of outdoor recreation and the idea of wilderness. And again, those are conversations that wouldn't happen if I wasn't here in this position. So by just being here, I'm demonstrating what historians bring to the table to people who otherwise wouldn't really know and would kind of be stuck in an echo chamber of economics or natural resource management or any of these other more involved education paths. And with that said, we're hiring. If anyone's looking for summer labor or summer work, excuse me, we're looking for summer labor. There is a full-time position that's similar to mine. I'm not sure, since that's still in San Juan National Forest, it's a little different as far as outreach goes, but certainly take a look if anyone's looking for a job. And I can open it up to questions now.
Alex, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It's really amazing that you have been able to kind of continue thinking like a historian, even outside of the grad program. What I would love for folks to do is, if they have questions, to just raise your hand, and then Alex or I can call on you, and you know, we'll try and kind of make this more of a conversation. Alex, would you mind stopping sharing your screen?
Yeah.
So we can all kind of see each other here.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Questions, anybody? Oh, I see Jared's raised his hand. Jared.
Alex, thanks for taking time to be with us here today. And Ariel and Lauren, thank you for working with him to arrange this. So, and Alex, by the way, we talk about you all the time. You make us proud that you've gone on to do such great work. So if you were to stay with SJMA for a long period of time, what would be the prospects for career advancement and diversification of the kinds of things you do?
That's a good question. I think I'm kind of going through that right now, just with changes to partnership agreements and restructuring to kind of allow me to do what I'm hoping to here and what they're hoping to have me do. Because I mean, I knew I was overqualified for this position when I applied to it. You know, it is largely front desk work. But we're all excited about the kind of directions I can go and how I can. So I'm the one person in Montrose for our organization. So I'm really developing some like name recognition between conservation work and responsible recreation in the San Juans and San Juan Mountains Association, because they've been in Durango for a long time, but I'm like the face up here. And so I guess there is good opportunity for that. It just is up to me to make that, if that makes sense. I think there isn't like as structured, being a nonprofit, there isn't really a structured career trajectory. You know, it's not like public lands ambassador, visitor information manager, director, etc. But again, they really appreciate what I'm bringing to the table and told me as long as I want to stay around that they want to keep me around. So
Anybody else have any questions? Yeah, Haley.
Sorry, I didn't know how to raise my hand on Zoom. I'm just curious more about the field work that you do.
So I guess, I mean, tabling is technically field work, but I have been doing a lot of like counter collections for the BLM. So they have these buried counters at trailheads that are magnetic, so they track every car that drives past. And that's kind of the way of capturing how many people are going to this trailhead, going to this campsite. And so I'll go out with the rec specialists and collect that data a lot. I've been invited to do a ride along with the law enforcement officer, but I don't really want to do that. I don't think he has his work cut out for him down here.
Anybody else? JC.
Alex, it's so good to see you. I miss you.
Thanks, you
But
guys.
my question for you is, how do you not get discouraged when you're applying for all of these jobs? How did you manage to like keep a positive note going forward?
I don't know. I think I applied when I was looking for jobs last year. I had this general sense of what I wanted to do. And then also I knew where I wanted to wind up, which was somewhere on the Colorado Plateau. So I mean, it's kind of foolish. I'm not getting rich working for a nonprofit. And I think if anyone is, they're probably committing tax fraud. But I kind of put myself in a position where I could choose. And so I applied to a couple other Durango nonprofits and did get rejected, and that stunk, but I just kind of, you send out an application or two a week, and then you do another round, and then you do another round, and it's not fun, but eventually the one comes up. And I was really excited about just SJMA in general when I saw this job. I'm pretty sure it was a High Country News one. I think that's where they posted it. But I mean, I just had this mentality where it's like, oh, I know how to do this, this, and this. I could do that. And then you just throw out an application. It is a lot of work, and it is like mundane. But I guess just, again, the worst that can happen is you don't hear back. And I mean, I've been in the service industry for so long that I also had that to fall back on, which like, I like bartending and I like talking to people in that capacity. So.
So, tied to the job search, I was wondering if you recall exactly, what kinds of things did you say to sort of connect the dots for your prospective employer? How did you present the skills that you developed in the master's program in an interview context?
So, they interview questions are always so like, they're kind of predictable a lot of the time. So like, what's an example of a difficult situation you've had to deal with, and how do you structure your time? And I really just thought back to like, well, I just spent 2 years or 1.5 years writing this 225-page paper, and that's a big feat, and that takes a lot of discipline. So really just thinking back to experiences in grad school, be it a term paper, or be it how to structure your time, how to manage different classes. Again, I had bartending experience, so that's like the best place to manage difficult situations is drunk people. But I mean, there were a lot of times in the SGMA interview where I just, would throw out something that was like, oh yeah, I do this every week in a grad program. And they'd be like, oh, wow, I never thought about it that way. Liesel sent me for writing cover letters, but also a good way to like structure how you'd respond to questions and how you'd like say, this is what I did that meets this thing that you're looking for. She had me go through and break up every, like, in a job posting, there's like in this role, you'll do this, 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 and this. And so she had me put all that into a spreadsheet and say, like, these 3 things I did in grad school meet this one thing that they're asking for. And that was a good way of kind of like disassembling a job posting and then applying what I could do. And then it just depends on what questions they ask in an interview, which part of that you call back on.
So it sounds to me like almost the way that we think about history is kind of as this like this kind of unit, like, well, what do you do? Well, I do history. And in this process, you're really thinking about like, okay, but is history more a set of skills? Is it communication? Is it data analysis? Is it, time management? Is it structured like methods of inquiry using like a variety of data sources? It's kind of like translating this huge kind of contiguous experience and really making it more granular in order to say, okay, yes, I tick that box, even though this job isn't necessarily historian.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I don't talk to them about my like definition of wilderness and all of these things that I spent so much time thinking about as a historian. But I can read sources and I can do all of these kind of like raw things that people want out of an employer, or excuse me, an employee, and I can do them well. So I think that's really the thing that kind of I know got lost when I was like an undergrad with a history degree applying for jobs. Just how to communicate like what you do as a historian and what you can do and how that meets their needs. Because I was talking to someone at ASEH last week who like told me the statistic that like history majors actually are a humongous part of the job force, and it's just because they're in such diverse spots that like no one knows what you do with a history degree, because you can do so much with a history degree. You just, again, you have to connect those dots and say like, I've spent 2 years learning about these things and this is what I did to become a master at them.
That's thought-provoking stuff. I mean, I wrote down your the best way to change perceptions of historians is to be a historian doing something interesting. Like, I want that tattooed like right here.
Yeah, I kind of have to credit Childers for that one too. I know someone asked a question last WHA about like, how do you kind of reach these communities as a public historian? And it is, I mean, I'm a public historian. I just don't do public history work all the time.
Questions from anybody else? Yeah, Amber. And then Leighton.
Hi, Alex. So you've talked about like going from grad school to job that might not be a historian job. What about how you've gone from your job with SJMA right now and how it's making you think more about like the questions that you were grappling with in your thesis and with your comps process and like those academic questions that are coming up from this experience?
So I think like, I'm interested in PhD programs now, and I'm starting to look and apply or think about applying. And that really came down to one, I mean, I had a lot of free time this winter because our front door was closed because we're like a federal building, so we had different COVID policies. But really just thinking about like how to incite these changes and how to reach like the communities you want, and I mean how to like pursue what I think would be fulfillment in life, and just kind of thinking about like personal goals and like life goals and trying to figure out the best way to meet that. Because I mean, a job's something you do 40 hours a week, so you spend a lot of time there. So you might as well kind of try and craft towards what you want by the time you're like 50 or 60. And that's, I mean, that's exactly what this position was. It was a way to kind of start doing this work that I thought was important, but it's, you know, you have to be open to wherever your life takes you.
That's very perceptive, I think. I think so often the first job that you get out of grad school can feel like what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's a
Or people
stepping
take a
stone.
longer view. Yeah.
Exactly.
Leighton, go ahead with your question.
Hey, Alex.
Hey.
Mind you, I'm not a product of the program, but I have I'm a second-hand product of one of the people who used to run it, Greg Spoke. So, and also a former Semel employee years ago. So, I'm noticing that the Public Lands History Center and the CSU Public History and CRM sort of machine, if you will, really seems to have growing name recognition. And I mean, I've benefited from some of that, and I didn't even get a degree from CSU. And so I'm wondering, especially working with BLM and other federal people there, are you finding people who who say, "Oh, sure, you work for so and so, or you're from CSU and PLHC," or maybe not so much?
So I think just for the recording real quick, because I think it's probably going to be a little dicey to hear that on the recorded version. I think Leighton asked a question about kind of the traction and the name recognition of the Public Lands History Center and the CSU Public History and CRM tracks, and was asking if I think if how that has benefited you, or if there is kind of if there are people that recognize your degree granting institution, and you know, if that's had an effect on your job.
I don't know as much about the Public Lands History Center, just because like the relationships we have through that are like largely with CPW. I think if I applied to a CPW position, there'd be much more. But you know, trying to change that. But I definitely, I mean, a lot of my coworkers graduated from CSU, I found out, and like there's a big pipeline between our seasonal positions and like Warner. And I was actually talking to our silviculturist yesterday, and he's done a lot of projects with Tony Chang, who is my out of field advisor. So I think there's definitely like people recognize what a Colorado State University education gets you. I think that is also part of why they were so open to like providing a venue to let me do what I want here. Ugh, excuse me. Because I mean, my supervisors are very supportive. The executive director is super supportive. But they also, you know, told me that they really want me to like pursue things that will help me advance my career and get towards this goal that I have, because there is so much overlap with their mission. And so I think CSU being such a solid institution definitely played into that.
Questions from anybody else? Yeah, Lauren.
Hi. I was wondering what different aspects of like public engagement and like working with like people maybe outside of like really niche communities looked like in a job like yours.
It's a good question. So I guess, I mean, outdoor recreation's kind of niche. in general. Sorry, I'm just reading Leighton's response. But I mean, so there's kind of different tiers with how I and we engage people at SJMA. So like, I'm at the Public Land Center, which is just, it's pretty much a visitor center. Fort Collins doesn't really have an equivalent, but if anyone's been to Moab, there's that big visitor center downtown, and it's a very similar type feel. We have a bookstore. And so that is really how I interact with like a local community. You know, rancher permittees between the Forest Service and BLM will come in for meetings. People that drive past and say, oh, that looks interesting, will come in. And then people with specific questions in a wide range of recreation levels will come in. And then also call, you know, I talk to people from all over the country that are coming to Montrose to hunt because we have 2 over-the-counter units. But then through tabling, you know, it's kind of more of these smaller interest groups, like URA Ice Fest is ice climbers and rock climbers. Farmers markets are that type of person that goes to a community. I've been to river fests, which is like rafters and kayakers. And then we have trail ambassadors and wilderness crews who are actually out on the land on trails, and they're, you know, that's even more niche because they're interacting with the people that are on that specific trail. But I guess that's like, you know, that's the audience for this job. Does that kind of answer your question, or?
Yeah, it does. It seems interesting to kind of get to like work through the different tiers of like levels of public engagement too, and kind of like hone in on like specific interests, but also like speak more generally also.
Exactly, yeah. And you know, like relationships with outfitters and, you know, storefronts that have permits, like fly shops and stuff like that, is again different ways of reaching different audiences.
Yeah, I think Lauren's
As far as like history goes, I think, you know, I'm lucky if I can talk about regional history or some of those things on a phone call. But it is that meeting point of kind of translating my worldview through this organization to the public.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, Lauren's actually got kind of a similar position coming this summer. So possibly she's interested in learning what to expect for engaging with the Fort Collins public this summer.
What are you doing, Lauren?
I have a summer position being a public engagement assistant for the Natural Areas Association up here. So yeah, it'll be like working closely with summer camps and then doing some social media stuff too. So I feel like maybe that could be like good experience for a job like yours or something kind of like in the same realm. So it's been cool to kind of hear about your experience.
Definitely, yeah.
I have a question as well. Hi, Alex. I've heard so much about you, so it's really nice to finally meet you. The program here is great and amazing. Is there anything that you feel it didn't prepare you for? I know you're not exactly doing a lot of history work at the moment, but is there anything that the program lacked, or you noticed that, yeah, once you got into the real world?
Nice to meet you too, Christy. I read your profile. Congrats. I think I developed, just through studying these agencies and especially the Forest Service, like a very romanticized view of like what you can do in my position. I wasn't nearly prepared for like the federal bureaucracy side of things. I was hoping that I could avoid that a little more by like being in a nonprofit that partners with with federal agencies. So that's been kind of difficult, just like the pace at which things get done. You know, you get public that comes in and wants to have this instant interaction with someone who like is busy for the next 2 weeks, and I'm the person that has to say, sorry, it takes a little longer. So I think that's really, I don't think anyone, you know, through PSRE, I had, and PSRE at the onset of COVID, I know Jared can attest to this, and Ariel, like there was a lot of navigating the university bureaucracy. But I mean, on a federal level, it's so much larger and so much more, you know, because there's these missions and you can't stray from the mission. So it's a little more rigid than I was expecting, if that makes sense.
That's really scary to hear, Alex.
No, yeah.
There's something worse than university bureaucracy. Although I actually, to the extent that I've engaged with the federal bureaucracy, I think you're right. I fear so anyway.
Well, just, I mean, even like I'm not on the GS schedule or any of the, like I'm technically paid by the BLM, but I'm paid through SJMA, and just like listening to friends talk about that, it just is so confusing to me. GS schedule is like how the promotion and pay scale for federal jobs.
Yeah, go ahead, Jared.
So, Alex, as I know you know, many of our students do, a lot of government and nonprofit and other people who are interested in outdoor recreation around the country are grappling with the question of racial diversity within outdoor recreation, and what are the structural problems that prevent greater diversity and democratic access, and what are the steps that can be taken, and what are the obstacles to taking even small steps. I'm just wondering if SJMA, is this on their radar? Is this anything that you encounter within the organization of efforts to enhance access to outdoor recreation for diverse groups, racial ability, socioeconomic, all of the above?
Yeah, it certainly is. And, you know, our mission isn't to like limit who recreates. You know, we want as many people recreating as possible, because that's how you can create a connection to these places. I guess as far as SJMA itself, we would, so those three, like explore, learn, and protect, that learn tenet of our theory of change is really how we try and address that. And through going into schools, through providing opportunities and scholarships for our camps, and, you know, working with communities and school districts to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to get out onto public lands. We had so my executive director started pretty much when I did, and she was the executive director of Durango Nature Studies, which has attractive land right next to the Southern Ute Reservation. And that's really kind of one of our I guess jump off points or start points for creating this connection. It's not, you know, hour drive up to Red Mountain Pass to get people into wilderness areas around the national forest, but it's to get people to start playing outside and asking questions and learning about the environment and creating this connection. And so that's been really great. I don't know all that much about our programming down there just because it's in Durango, but that's definitely something that we've been grappling with and trying to address, and especially, you know, like San Juan's our Ute territory, but there is such a limited presence of Ute people, at least administratively here. So we're really trying to kind of develop those connections. I guess in Montrose, in my role, an example of that would be the Ute Museum is in Montrose, which if anyone is like driving through and has a chance to go, it's awesome. And everyone there is really awesome. The director just won an award from the state for Women's History Month, actually. And we've been developing a relationship just to kind of diversify the bookstore at the Public Land Center, because like BLM office here manages Eagle Rock Shelter and a lot of petroglyph sites and cultural resources. Eagle Rock Shelter is the oldest inhabitants in the United States, or sign of inhabitants in the United States. And the only like tell of that is like 3 pictures of Chief Uray and Chipeta and another Ute chief in an office. And so like I'm really trying to extend our understanding. We have history books about mining, but we don't have history books about the people that were here long before miners and were pushed off of land by miners.
Well, I think we have probably time for one more quick question before we all go forth into our afternoons here. Would anybody like to close us out? Come on, guys, don't let me down.
Maybe, Alex, words of wisdom for everybody. Second years that are going off into the world, and as first years who have a year left.
Comps wasn't that bad. It sucked, but like I said, it's a great way to really boil down everything we've learned in a grad program. I wouldn't do it again. I mean, I guess I probably will have to do it again if I go to a PhD program, but like I think that it was hard, but it was very beneficial, especially months removed or a year removed. And just kind of take those kind of big picture things that we've had to think about towards the end of our program, and that reflection that you all have done at this point in the program, and really take that to go forward, because that's really what, in my view, CSU history program was. It really built you up to a point to then go back into the world.
I think that's a great way to close this out. Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you, Christy, for that very thoughtful last question. We can't tell you how much we appreciate you spending time with us this afternoon, and we love seeing you going out in the world, kind of taking forward everything that you've gotten from the program and applying it to the world. I mean, that's really what we're all about here in the history department and at CSU. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Leighton, for joining us. If anybody would like to get in touch with Alex, if you have any further questions as you kind of go about your day, please let me know. I'm happy to share contact information as long as that's okay with you, Alex. Great.
Yeah, I can put my email in the chat.
Perfect. And I guess you'll be seeing, you might be seeing Dale and a few other folks in Uray.
Yeah.
At some point. We'll keep you posted on that. All right.
Good
Have a
to
good
see you all.
everyone.
Have a good afternoon.